Correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Roll for initiative.
Greetings, RFI Nation, and welcome to the Roll for Initiative podcast. This is issue number 18. Tonight I am DM Vincent along with NPC Jason. Jason, how are you tonight?
Hey, I'm doing great. Happy Memorial Day.
That's right, this is Memorial Day weekend, and we have actually a special guest for you sitting with us on the line, Margaret Weis. Margaret, how are you tonight?
Hi. How are you?
We're doing wonderful. I'm glad you can join us for this wonderful show about Dragonlance tonight. That's going to be the focus.
Well, I'm very happy to. Thank you for inviting me.
And a lot of people have called in and asked questions. We took the best of everything just to throw it into the show tonight. But we're going to start off with a few things we need to wrap up before we get into the meat of the show. First, we're just going to give out our website address, rfipodcast.com. rfistaff@gmail.com is where you can contact us. And facebook.com/rfipodcast. Jason, you did have a T-shirt giveaway to go over because we didn't do it last time because I was out without a voice last time.
Yep, so let's go ahead and get stuck into that. We've got a pretty exciting bunch of commenters that joined up to be entered into the roll. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get that out and get the dice ready. So what happened was we had some rules set up that said we would take anybody who commented before the show, and we gave it as, last week. We forgot to change the rules when the show ended up being a week late. So we have 23 people that made it in under the wire for the first deadline, and then 4 people that showed up afterwards. So even though technically the latecomers fell outside of the rules, I didn't feel right leaving them out, so I've worked out a roll that's going to be fair for everybody.
Okay.
Since we got 23 in the first bunch, I'm going to roll a d6.
Okay.
Odds, I take somebody from the first half. Even, I take somebody from the second half.
Okay.
If it's from the second half, because we only have 23, not 24, a 12 on the d12 is going to send me over to the d4, where we're going to roll for the latecomers. And I'm going to videotape this because I know somebody out there is going to say, you didn't roll it right.
Okay.
So, here we go. First of all, I want to point out that I am using Game Science Precision Dice, so we're going to really keep the randomness to the max.
Okay.
And here goes the D6. And remember, odds comes from the first group, evens comes from the second group, and that is a 6. So evens, that means the latecomers have a chance to be in this one. We're going to the D12. So if it's a 12, I'm going to roll for the latecomers. If it's any other number, it's going to be the person who's with that. And by the way, I've got them all lined up here in numbers already. So and they're just going in the order of when they commented. So I will put that list up on the website rather than reading 25 or 20 whatever names. I can't do math. I can roll, but I can't do math.
Okay.
All right, so here's the D12. And it is a 1.
Ooh.
Meaning that the winner of our T-shirt is Matt Fall, F-A-U-L. So Matt Fall, congratulations. You have won a Roll for Initiative T-shirt. Get a hold of us, get your with your size, and whether you want the men's or women's, in case it's a gift for your girlfriend or wife or mother or daughter or anybody else. And we'll also contact you on the Facebook group. Congratulations, Matt Fall.
Yes, Jason will give you a shout-out on Facebook privately and get your address so we can email that shirt to you right away. Congratulations. Yeah.
If you can email a shirt, I want you to do one for me, too.
Okay, sure. Right away, Jason. Anyway, congratulations to him, and thank you for everybody that entered the contest. And we will have more contests coming up in the future. We just haven't decided what we're doing just yet. Now, on to our guest, Margaret Weis. Margaret, in the background, patiently waiting. First thing we want to talk about you is your writing career. When you first started writing the novels that we've all come to love and know, the Chronicles trilogy gift set, which is the Autumn Twilight, the Winter's Night, and the Spring Dawning, When you first started writing these books, what was your thought process, and how did you go about doing this? Is it just something you randomly threw together, or?
Oh, no, this is a very long story.
Okay.
Okay. I was working as an editor in a very small publishing company in Independence, Missouri, and where I was married, had 2 kids. Well, actually, at the time I was divorced and looking to get out of Independence, Missouri. So I found a notice in Publishers Weekly that TSR Incorporated, the creators of Dungeons & Dragons, were looking for a book or a games editor. And I had been following TSR. This was like 83, I guess, or 84. Anyway, and I just thought the whole concept of Dungeons & Dragons was fascinating. I didn't know how to play it, but I got a friend to run a game for me and my kids, and we loved it. So I applied for games editor. Of course, I knew absolutely nothing about the game. And they sent me this test, and I was clueless and sent it back, so of course I didn't get the job.
Oh.
So, but as serendipity would have it, my agent at the time, Ray Pinkner, lived in Milwaukee. And he knew the book editor, Gene Black. And Gene called Ray and said, I'm looking for a book editor. Do you know anybody? And Ray said, I happen to have a client who is a writer and an editor and would be very interested. And in fact, her application is in there right now. So Jane walked over to the game department and pulled my application. I went up there for an interview, and she hired me that very day. So I borrowed money from my parents and packed up the 2 kids and cats and moved up to Lake Geneva. And that was in 83.
Wow.
So,
Margaret, I have a question for you right away then. You know, I've read in interviews from the past that you said that, Tolkien was the only fantasy you had read, and that, that kind of locked it down for you, so you weren't going off reading other fantasy authors. But clearly you had an interest if you were playing D&D. How did you get an interest in the whole genre at the time?
Well, for one thing, I didn't read any other fantasy because at that time there wasn't a lot of other fantasy. I mean, there was Terry Brooks, and I had kind of looked at Shannara, and I wasn't my cup of tea. So I had been writing. You have to remember, all this time, I sold my first book in 81, and that was a biography of Frank and Jesse James. I was doing juvenile nonfiction. But all this time, I'm writing novels and putting them in boxes that will never see the light of day. And I'd write a novel and send it off to my agent, and he'd send it off, and it'd get rejected, and I'd write another one and send it off. And a lot of these were fantasy. So my agent said, write what you'd like to read. And so I thought, well, since I can't find anything to read, I'll write. And so I was familiar with fantasy. I liked fantasy even before I went to work for TSR. And when I got there, as part of my job as book editor, they said, okay, or Gene said, I'm going to make you editor in charge of the Dragonlance project, because TSR had never published adult novels before. They'd only done the Endless Quest books, which were wildly successful. And so she said, you be the editor. We're going to look for an author to write these, this fantasy Dragonlance. And so I said, okay, fine. And so I meet Tracy Hickman, who's the game designer in charge. And I sit in on a meeting, and he starts telling me the story, beginning with the meeting of the heroes at the end of the last film. And I still can't talk about this without getting all tripped up, because it was an incredible moment. He told the story, and I fell in love with it. And I knew these people. I knew these characters. I knew Raceland. I knew Karaman. I knew Tasselhoff. But, so, like I said, my job, they were going to go hire this big-name fantasy writer to write the story. And as Tracy said, they were going to not pay him anything and make up for that by not giving him the rights to the characters. So, of course, they didn't get anybody. I mean, agents, I was calling agents who would just hang up the phone laughing. I mean, we knew, we were so naive. So anyway, we finally.
Can you say who any of those authors were?
No, I can't even remember at this point. I never got past the agent. I probably never got past the secretary to the agent. But anyway, so we ended up, we said, okay, maybe we'll just get a mid-list or a low-list author. Okay, fine. So we hold this audition, and we invite some authors that we kind of, a bunch of us knew. And they submitted material, and we chose one. So I was supposed to, Tracy was working on the game side. All the time, all the game product is coming out, and what I'm doing is I'm giving life to the characters because they had the characters. They knew, because Elmore and Parkinson and Easley were working on these amazing paintings, and they had all the game stats. That I knew, for example, that Raceland was a red row mage, and that he was 3rd level, which he had X number of spells, and he had golden skin and hourglass eyes.
Yeah.
And he had this twin brother named Cameron. So I said in one of the meetings, I said, okay, why does Raceland have golden skin and hourglass eyes? It's not genetic. His brother is perfectly normal looking.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, because the artist thought it would look cool.
Oh.
So I have to come up with a reason why he has golden skin and hourglass eyes. So I said, okay, it must have something to do with his magic. And then I thought, what if he had to take a test? What if all mages had to take a test? Which would make sense, because you don't want some, Kender running around casting humongous magic spells. So you have to take a test. And what if, in this test, you had to bet your life so that if you failed, you died?
Right.
And so I thought, okay, this is cool. Now, if Raceland decides that he's ambitious enough and hungry for power enough that he is going to take this test, how is Cameron going to feel about this? This overprotective, codependent twin brother. And all of a sudden, that gave me insight into Raceland's character. I knew Cameron. And in fact, I wrote the short story, The Test of the Twins, that dealt with that subject.
Right.
That was published in Dragon magazine, which got more mail at that time than any other story they had ever published. Mm-hmm. So all this time, I'm doing this for all the other characters, and we're feeding it to this author. And he's sending material back. He's sending the chapters back as he's writing them. And they were horrible. They were just horrible. The only character he really cared about was Flint, the dwarf. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot of Flint and none of anybody else. So, and he didn't like Raceland. He didn't get Hasselhoff. It wasn't working. So Tracy and I were at our wits' end because the book was supposed to go to the printer in like 3 months or something, 6 months, and it was horrible. And we were so caught up in this, we knew we had something really, really cool if we could just get it out there. So Tracy and I said, okay, we'll take one weekend. And we wrote the prologue and the first 5 chapters. And I have never since done that, written 5 chapters and a prologue in a weekend. But that's how caught up we were in this book. And that Monday, we gave it to my editor, Jean, and my boss. And we said, we think we should be the ones to write this book. And she told me years later that she only looked at it because she didn't want to hurt our feelings. So she took what we had written into her office and shut her door. She had an office. We had cubicles. Mm-hmm. So we're sitting in my cubicle and we're dying, and it's an hour goes by and we're just like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And then she comes out and she's all, she says, this is exactly what we've been looking for. And we said, we know. And so they fired the other author, but he got to keep the advance because they were afraid he was going to sue. Mm-hmm. And so Tracy and I, we didn't get an advance. We had to keep our jobs, because I was working on projects and Tracy was doing the game. And so we were writing at night and on the weekends. And he had a 6-month deadline, which he'd used up half. We had to meet the same deadline, 3 months. But we did it, and so turned the book in, and nobody thought it was going to do anything. Because who had ever heard of Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman, But it hit the New York Times bestseller list as a write-in.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm going to take a moment to squash a Wikipedia rumor, then you could probably get rid of it so we can wipe it off history, that Laura and Tracy Hickman devised the concept of Dragonlance while driving in their car on the way to the TSR job application.
Yes, no, that's true.
Oh, that really is true.
That is true.
Oh.
Tracy came to work about a year ahead of me. And it's very interesting because we've talked about this before. When he and I each separately took the jobs at TSR, we had both of us hit bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Financially, career-wise, everything. Tracy he was faced with either going to work as a fry cook at the Sizzler or packing up his family and moving to Wisconsin. And his father actually told him, son, you've failed at everything you've done. Don't go to Wisconsin and fail because I can't afford to bring you back. But Tracy did it anyway. So, yeah, while they were driving across country, he and Laura talked about a world where men rode on the back of dragons, and they actually came up with the first three characters, Tanis, Lorana, and Kitiara.
Huh.
Yeah, I had just a question going back to what you were saying about, the writing together on those. I've always been fascinated by authors who write with other authors about the process, like how you divide the work and how you divide what words actually make it to the page.
Well, I've written with, I'm on my fourth co-author now, different co-author. I've written with my daughter, I've written with my ex-husband, I've written with Tracy, and now I'm writing with a new co-author named Bob Kramus. And it's different with everyone. The process is different. It depends on the personality. With Tracy, because he was doing the game design work and I was the writer at the time, because I'd actually had books published, I wrote the book. And I would send material to him, and he would look at it and comment and send it back to me. And that's just how we've kept working over all these years. That's just how he and I work. With my daughter, it was a little bit different. She did a lot of the writing and sent it to me, and then I kind of rewrote. The thing I think in a partnership is it's important, to me at least, that the book have one voice.
Right.
You don't want the reader to be reading along and suddenly hear somebody else's voice because it jars them out of the world. So
interesting.
That's how I've worked.
Okay. Well, let's just step away from the Dragonlance setting for just 1 second here, and let's talk about your custom setting that you had devised, the Cortex system.
Yes.
Where did this Cortex system come from, and what made you decide to jump into the whole gaming industry and make your own game setting, Cortex?
Oh, my ex-husband and I, actually, when we were husband and wife, had started a game company many years ago. We did collectible card games. And we went from there into role-playing games. We did Sovereign Stone, that had its own system. And then when Don and I got divorced, Jamie Chambers came on board, and he kind of took what we liked about the Sovereign Stone system and some other ideas that he had, and he put it together and did the Cortex system. And then at the time, we were fortunate enough to get the license to Serenity.
Yes.
From Universal, and so we used the Cortex system in that setting, and it proved to be just really, really good. I mean, it was just made for that, allowing for a lot of kind of wahoo fun role playing without worrying a whole lot about rules.
It kind of reminds me of the White Wolf system with the D10 and everything, almost.
Somebody always has to tell me what dice to roll. So, I mean, I understood. It was interesting because the Cortex system was the first game system I actually understood. I actually knew what dice to roll. I have never, to this day, figured out Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, wow.
Well, they say the best things are what things that people create because they need them for themselves.
Yes.
Because they wanted to have it themselves.
Yeah.
So have you seen or have you heard much from different fans about settings that they've created in the Cortex system?
Yeah, we get. In fact, actually, one of the hearing from the fans actually prompted us to go out and get the Leverage license.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Or Leverage, the TV show about the con artist.
Yes,
yeah.
Good show.
We kept hearing from fans that they were using our system to play Leverage, and people, they were asking questions and stuff like that, and then of course the creator of Leverage is a huge game guy.
Yeah.
And so it just seemed really natural for us to go get the license. So, and we've really been having a lot of fun with it.
I also saw that you also landed Supernatural, a popular TV series, also.
Yes, we have Supernatural, and right now we're working on Smallville.
Wow. Well, let's take a step over into our feature of the night and talk a little bit more about Dragonlance. We'll be right back. So we're in our feature tonight, and we're going to talk about a couple things here. First, about the first edition campaign setting book that you had designed way back in the 80s. I don't have the date off my hand. Jason, you have that date offhand?
I don't.
Neither do I. I think it was either 83 or 84.
It's funny in 2010 with Wikipedia at our fingertips that I don't keep these kind of things just tapping away. It's proof that we don't use cheat sheets.
No.
Must have been 84 because the modules came out started in January, I believe, of that year, and the modules came out ahead of the book.
Right.
So, but the book might have been 84 or even 85.
Well, one of the things I wanted to... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. No, that's okay.
One of the things I wanted to talk about in the setting was the unique money system that you guys had developed. How it was steel instead of gold. I was wondering, how did you go about deciding it was going to be steel instead of gold like everybody else, just to be different, or?
Yeah, I think so, because, see, that was a decision that happened before I came on board.
Oh, I see.
And so this was something the gamers had decided. The logic behind it was that in a world that has completely gone to hell, even gold, the only thing that has any value is steel, so you can protect what you've got.
Interesting.
And so that's when they decided to make steel, and it drove me absolutely crazy trying to write that. It just didn't sound right.
Yeah, a lot of people are curious about why you guys chose that, and now there's their answer. Mm-hmm. So we have a bunch of characters that you had, well, I should say the Hickmans developed, and you had helped further develop along the way. You did speak about some of the main characters of the Hero of the Lance, but most notably Lord Soth. There's a lot of controversy that surrounds him in Dragonlance history. How much of an input did you have when you created that character or wrote about that character?
Oh, the Soth was very interesting. We knew by when Soth entered, which I think he comes in. I can't remember when he comes in, but
he was.
We knew we needed the Death Knight because at this time when we were writing the books, we were pretty much following the game path. Mm-hmm. And the game rules at one point the games called for a Death Knight to appear with all the banshees and everything else. And all of a sudden one day, Tracy comes running over to my cube and he said, "Well, let me tell you this story." And he sat down and he told me the story of Lord Soth from beginning to end, how he was an honorable knight, his tragic downfall because he falls in love for this elven maiden, and the murder and the fall of the castle, and how he turns into the Death Knight. And we were so enthralled by Lord Soth that we really had a hard time keeping him out of the story because he was such a fascinating character, he kind of tended to take over. And he was really only a minor character who was only supposed to be there for a little bit. But I mean, we liked him so much, and the fans liked him so much that he eventually he comes back when we were doing the Legends series and the twins.
Yes.
And had this creepy love affair with Kitiara. So.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask because you've mentioned the TSR offices a couple times with the cubes and everything, and it's really catching my attention. Because I'm trying to imagine that kind of a work environment where you're in a cubicle and you're writing and you've got to do these creative things and you have to be able to have these, meetings with other people, and of course it sounds like it's an open area where people could easily get distracted by each other. Could you kind of describe what it was like working in that situation and how you stayed creative?
It was so much fun. I tell you, working at TSI, those were the most fun years of my life. We were in R&D, research and development, and we were on the second floor of a building that had no windows. It used to be an old, now rumor has it used to be an old Q-tip factory. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it was a factory. It had no windows. So all the secretaries and the bosses and finance and everybody else was on the first floor, and we were all R&D up on the second floor. And we had cubicles, and there were like offices that had doors all around the perimeter, and the cubicles were like all in the middle. And there was the book department, the game department, and Dragon Magazine, their departments, all their people. And the art department had their own room on the second floor with the artists, Larry Elmore and Keith Parkinson, Jeff Easley, and Clyde Caldwell. And they they had all of their art. I mean, imagine walking into a room with all these paintings. I mean, I remember the day when they had, because they put out the first 12 Dragonlance modules, and each one had a painting, had an original painting. They were all lined up for us to see down the hall.
How big were the original paintings?
Oh, huge. I mean, really big, because they were all painted in oil. This was the days before airbrush and everything else. These were all original oil paintings.
Wow.
And I mean, it was amazing. And so they had them all this art up on the wall, and each artist had kind of his own corner and all his stuff around it. And in the middle was a toilet.
Okay.
Which somebody had got, I don't know who, but Jeff Easley, who did costume design and everything, he developed this hand, this rubber hand that he put in the toilet lid. So you walk in the art department and he'd squeeze this and the hand would wave at you. And they had this model, this woman that, because they used model to see how the clothes would drape and everything, so they had this model that was always in various stages of undress or wearing weird stuff. And she was in there. And so then there were the game designers. And there was those of us in the book department. Now, every Thursday afternoon, the game designers would get to play test. They'd play test their games or games people sent in. And so here in the book department, we weren't allowed to do it. So here we are trying to work, trying to edit. And in the rooms around us, it's all this dice rolling and hilarity and yelling. I was really envious. And we'd have water pistol fights. We had a huge water pistol fight once that had been organized over like the space of a week with the editors against the game designers, and we were sending vicious messages back and forth. And so it was like 3:00 on Friday. The water gun fight breaks out, and they had a tank. They had Jeff Grubb sitting in a rolling chair, and Tracy was propelling him, and he had like this squirt gun, and this was a tank, and we were just, we were running around and screaming, and even my editor, Jean Black, got into it. And yeah, at this time, I'm in my 30s. I'm not, I know she was older than me, but she's running around. All of a sudden, here comes the VP with a bunch of guys in suits coming up the stairs, and he looks and he stops dead. And it's people who are considering investing in the company. Oh, boy, did we get into trouble. So, yeah.
Wow. That's an interesting looking inside TSR's creative process.
Yeah.
Let's get a little static there. Stepping back into the characters of we were talking about a few moments ago of Lord Soth, there was a lot of debate surrounding the character as of who has the actual permission to use the character, and they said that TSR or Wizards of the Coast didn't have permission to use Soth and change his history by moving him to the Ravenloft setting. Now, was that true that you guys are not acknowledging that setting of Ravenloft history?
Well, I mean, Lord Soth, everything we did at Dragonlance belonged to TSR.
Right.
And so it was not a case of whether they needed our permission or not. They could just do it, and they did it. And they took Soth away and threw him in Ravenloft. Well, we wanted him in our books, so we were like, we had plans, he had to be in our books. And so we're like, well, no, he's staying in Dragonlance. But should have been a controversy. I mean, you could have, let's face it, it's a made-up character, a made-up world. You could have Soth and Ravenloft, you could put him in Forgotten Realms. It doesn't matter. But the fans got into it and made it this huge controversy. And, we're always certain that Tracy and what was really ironic was Tracy had created Ravenloft. That was his creation. And so it was, so it just got beyond the point of silliness.
Yeah. It got to the
point.
We
use Soth, they use Soth, we don't care. Although I went to a convention once where I was the guest of honor, and they ran a special game for me, and the guy had designed it was Kitiara leading a party into Ravenloft to rescue Soth and bring him back. It was so cool.
Well, Wizards of the Coast actually had made a statement saying that to resolve the conflict that the fans were having, saying that he never actually was in Ravenloft, and the Mist returned him back to Corinne before anything ever happened. So I guess you guys can continue. Are you going to stick with that statement as well?
Well, of course, Dragonlance has come to an end, at least for the moment, so I guess it really doesn't matter.
Well, that's something I wanted to talk about later on in the show, but since you brought it up, what does the future hold for Dragonlance and Dungeons & Dragons? I mean, do we going to see something, or?
I have no clue.
Has anybody?
They have not told me.
No one's approached you, huh?
Nope.
If they would,
I don't know what they're doing.
If they did approach you, would you gladly continue on, or?
At the moment, no. I'm involved in a 2 series that I'm working on, one with Tracy and one with this new co-author, Robert Kramis, and those are going to keep me busy, and I'm really, really enjoying the work I'm doing now, so, for the time being, I never say never. I don't know what's going to happen in 10 years, so we'll see.
Do you get approached about things like Dragonships and, people looking to see that end up in game settings?
Yeah. We've had a lot of interest in doing Deathgate at a game setting, and we're kind of thinking about that. And also this new series I'm working on, the Dragon Brigade, with Bob Kramis. We're exploring the possibility of turning that into a game setting. Because it's fantasy, but it's very different from anything that I've ever done. I mean, it's kind of set in an age where there are dragons and hot air balloons and cannons and magic and demons and saints and giant bats and that stuff. It's just really cool.
I mean, the thing that's amazing now is that when you bring some of these things up, if you had said this 30 years ago and somebody said, well, let's put that in a film, it would seem pretty unbelievably difficult to get to. But now we're in an age where, with CG reaching the point it has, I would think you'd be hearing a lot from filmmakers wanting to talk about the kind of things you're doing now as well.
I think the problem is, and I've actually been talking to a guy. He's not making a Dragonlance film because, of course, that TSR or Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro own the rights.
Right.
He's producing a Dragonlance trailer, and I mean, this guy is really serious. He had a film at Cannes Film Festival this year, so he's really into this, and all he wants to do is like this 5-minute trailer for what a Dragonlance movie might look like. Mm-hmm. And so his big problem, of course, was how do you do a dragon? And he was talking, to CG people and all this sort of stuff. And I said, the problem with CG dragons is dragons are so magnificent and so immense that any time you see them on film, they look small. They are not as we imagine. And I don't know whether he's going to do this or not, but I said what I would do if I were doing a movie is I would never show the entire dragon. You would see, it would be like Psycho.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't see the murderer. You don't see the dragon. You might see an eye, you might see a tooth, a claw, a tail, whipping about, and smacking in or something, but you would never, that to me, so your mind takes over and provides the immensity and the magnificence and the wonder of dragons.
Yeah, because what's in your mind can nothing. You're right. Nothing you could put on screen could ever equal the kind of majesty that you could create in your imagination and your mind as you're doing that.
So, I'd just throw that out there for any would-be filmmaker.
How did they approach you about doing this movie, and how close was it to the actual history of Dragonlance? Did you have to adapt it a lot, or
actually, we did. We knew about it from the beginning. We were introduced to the screenwriter, and we worked with him or talked with him about his ideas and how he was. You know, the main difficulty is taking this big novel and that's got so many scenes that people love and boiling it down to a 90-minute movie. And we thought that George just did a great job. And so we liked the script. We liked what he did with it. We loved the music.
Yeah.
I think the best part of that movie is the music by Carl Purser. I actually got to go to one of the recording sessions in Minneapolis, and it was fantastic. I think the animation had problems, but that was out of my control. There was nothing, we could do. We were happy that they did a movie, and I was happy that they put me in it. I have a cameo.
Yes.
Yes, there's even a drinking game around that now. So.
It was a great movie, and I was really surprised at all the popular voices that you had gotten for that. You had Lucy Lawless, you had Kiefer Sutherland.
Yes. Oh, wow. And how they got Kiefer. Oh, we really, really wanted Kiefer to do Raceland.
Perfect voice.
And one of the producers had called his agent and said, well, we'd like him to do the voiceover, and this is the amount of money we can pay him. And the agent again laughed and said, well, Kiefer doesn't do that. In fact, I'm not even going to tell him about it.
Wow.
And so the producer was at his wit's end, and so he packed up a whole box of Dragonlance books and game product and everything else, and he went to this bar where he knew Kiefer hung out. And so he goes into this bar, and there's Kiefer Sutherland sitting there in his booth, and so he walks over with this giant box, and he puts it down in front of Kiefer Sutherland, and he says, I'm with the Dragonlance movie, and we would be really interested in having you do the voice of the character of Raceland. So Kiefer starts telling him how much he loves fantasy and he enjoys it and all this sort of stuff. And he said, okay, let me take all this stuff home and read it, and I'll get back to you. So they said the next day he called and he said, I'll do it. And they said that he was so great to work with that a lot of actors, when they do a voiceover, they just come in, they sit down, they read the script cold. But Kiefer had wanted it early so he could look into it. He was very concerned about pronouncing the magic spells correctly. And so he wanted somebody to go over the magic spells with him. And he was, he said now, and he asked him, he said, now I want to understand this character's motivations and what he's doing and how he feels about his brother and all this. And they said it was just fabulous, and I think that really comes through in his acting. In fact, I thought all the actors were great.
Oh yeah.
So Lucy Lawless,
another big name.
She was offered it, and she just went home one day and she goes, or she was talking to her kids, and she said, well, I got this offer to do this voiceover in this movie. And she said, I think it's called Dragonlance or something. And her kids were like, Dragonlance? Whoa, yes, Mom, you have to do this.
So, wow. So you got two big names, and they're... It's just a great movie. I was actually happy to actually see it, and finally actually get to watch it again on Netflix on demand for anybody out there who wants to watch this movie. It is on demand right now for Netflix, so you can pick it up and watch it and enjoy it. Jason, did you had a look at the movie once or twice, right?
No.
No. Oh, okay. I thought if you
going to be, but it's going to be on my Netflix tonight after the show. I wonder if Kiefer Sutherland is playing any games now.
Yeah,
He's probably picking up an old copy of Top Secret and playing some spy games now that 24 is.
That'd be fun to play a spy game with Kiefer.
I bet it would.
I don't know. I might be kind of scared actually to play a game with him the way he acts sometimes.
Just do what he wants. Just do what he wants.
He'd roll all D. I mean, he'd only have D20s. That's the only.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, let's go into our final segment of the night and talk a little bit about the books themselves.
Close your eyes and tell me what you see.
The library.
If you wanted to pick up the Dragonlance books and start from the beginning, you're going to pick up something, if you look on Amazon, called the Dragonlance Chronicles Trilogy Gift Set. It has the first 3 books, as we talked about before, the Autumn Twilight, the Winter Night, and the Spring Dawning. Now, I read them quite a long time ago when they first came out, and I mean, the books were amazing. I mean, someone who wants to pick them up now, I'm kind of jealous to the simple fact that they can pick up a book, read the book, and go, haha, here's the next one. Meanwhile, someone like me had to sit and wait.
Yes.
While you guys were writing these books, and I had to go, when is this book coming out? When is this book coming out? So, how much time did it take between the books in all, like from the first book to the second book to the third book for actual writing process that went into it?
Well, because nobody at TSR thought the first book was going to do anything. It just kind of, the way it got out there was really weird too. But anyway, it did hit the New York Times bestseller list, and of course when it did that, they're like, oh my God, we've got to have more books, and we've got to have them right now, because at that time, TSR was kind of boom and bust constantly. Once they had, 1 month they had a ton of money, and the next month they're laying people off, and so this happened at kind of a time when they were laying people off and they really needed the money. So they said, okay, you guys have got to write another book and you've got to do it right away, but you still have to work on your jobs during the day. So we continue with the writing at night and on the weekends bit. And so I think the next book, I believe, took us 6 months. I think we had 6 months to do Spring Dawning. But then, and then we were working because they wanted to get all 3 books out in a year. They liked the idea of getting a trilogy that all 3 books would come out in a year, which is fine if you got them all written in advance, which we didn't.
Right.
But they were like constantly sort of breathing down our necks to get these books done. And so we did, I think where we came to a problem was when we were doing the last book in Legends, because they wanted that and were done in 3 months. And that was, I just don't recommend that. That was just consuming my life, and I had kids and everything else, but we got it done in 3 months. So
I wonder if setting a pace like that affected some of how prolific you've become since.
Oh, I don't write that much now. I mean, I for a while I was doing 2 books a year, and I'm down to now I'm trying to get down to about 1 book a year or 1.5 books a year.
Which is still incredibly prolific. It's still incredibly prolific. I mean, if you look at somebody like Terry Pratchett, who people think of as one of the most prolific authors out there, and he has maintained just a steady pace of getting a book out each year. There's so many authors that don't even come near that. So I think it's very impressive, and to actually do a good job with it.
Oh, well, thank you. But I mean, that's what I do now. I write. That's the way I make a living, and I write every day. And if it's Christmas, I am home. I'm writing. If it's New Year's, I'm writing, because that's what I do. I'm got that discipline set that I really don't know what to do with myself if I'm not writing in the mornings.
So something I notice a lot with Dragonlance over the history of time is the artwork with Dragonlance. I mean, it's just like blow your mind artwork, fabulous color splashes, wonderful character. Where do you guys approve your artwork, or do you hire someone out and then someone else decides?
Well, this kind of started back in the TSR days, because we were working so closely with the artists. I mean, Larry Elmore and Keith and these guys would sit in on the concept meetings. And, so like I say, they were the ones that came up with the golden skin and hourglass eyes for Raceland. So I think the idea that we had worked with the artist, and those first Dragonlance covers that Larry did with those 3 characters looking out at you and the dragon kind of looking menacingly behind. You don't know how many people have come up to me and said the reason I bought that book was because those characters spoke to me.
Yeah.
And so so we got very spoiled working with the artists. And when we sold the next series, Darksword, we sold it to Bantam Books. Mm-hmm. It was really funny because this was the first time, we had left the nest, okay, and here we've sold this series to this huge New York publisher. And so Larry Elmore came up to us, and in fact, by that time, I think both Tracy and I had left the company. And Larry came up to us and said, look, he said, I would love to do art, for these books for Bantam. I'd love to get my foot in the door. And we're going like, wow, Larry, we don't know. This is a huge New York publishing company, but, we'll ask. So they had flown us out to New York, and they were taking us out to dinner. And so we're sitting there, and we're all awed and impressed because, oh, my God, it's New York, and we're in this fancy restaurant. Mm-hmm. And the editor, who I believe at the time was Lou Aronica, said, I really have to ask you guys a favor. And we're going, oh, my God, what's this? And he goes, is there any way you could get Larry Elmore to do the art for your book? And Tracy and I looked at each other, and Tracy goes, well, I don't know. Larry's awfully busy, but we'll ask him. And so we got Larry to do the art for that series. Keith Parkinson did some of the art for the Deathgate series, including one of the great paintings, I think, on fantasy books of all time, which is the Fire Sea cover with the red dragon coming up out of the molten lava. And I should say the late Keith Parkinson, because Keith died a couple of years ago, and just tragic, way too young. And we just miss him terribly. So yeah, I have always been fortunate and in having really, really good, creative, innovative cover artists that have actually, that have come to me or emailed me and said, "What are your thoughts?" And so it's really been cool.
Okay. Well, we have one more thing for you here, and it was a voicemail that one of our listeners called in. It was from Darren Fox, was it, Jason? We decided, right?
Yes.
And
yes,
it was on
Darren.
Facebook. I'll play it for you, Morgan. If you can answer it, you can answer it. If not, you can answer it however you want. But here we go to the voicemail.
What level was Raistlin in the stories when he ascended and tried to defeat the Dark Queen? It seemed to me that he was only up to maybe 7th or 10th level, and that was a pretty big undertaking for someone of that level to try. Please explain that. Thanks.
So there's your question.
Well, I can basically explain it by saying I never understood levels. I really didn't care about levels. I needed, we needed him to do this, and by that time, we had gone, let me back up a minute to say that, like I said, the first Chronicles we kept really close to the game.
Right.
Because we thought that's what the readers would want, but as it turns out, when we talked to the fans, what we found out was the readers were reading the Chronicles books for the characters, but not necessarily are using them in the game. Or, so what we realized was that we didn't need to follow the game. The readers wanted, to know more about the characters. So by the time we got to Legends, we had pretty much pitched all the game rules and stuff right out the window. And we were able to continue on and do what we want without worrying about things like levels and stuff like that.
Did you have a games editor at any time that was going through and kind of checking for, especially during the early novels, checking for game accuracy?
No. Although we did have legal department. And this was a funny story.
Oh, huh.
So we're writing the Dragons on Twilight, and we're trying to meet this deadline, and somebody from legal department comes up and asks my editor, Jean, to see the manuscript, and Jean just rolled her eyes because legal department, oh my God.
Yeah.
So she gives them the manuscript, and they go off, and then they come back. Now, in order to understand this, you need to know about trademarks. When you trademark a word like Dragonlance, you have to say whether you want it used as a noun or an adjective or whatever. They had trademarked Dragonlance as an adjective. That's why you always see Dragonlance Chronicles, Dragonlance Legends, Dragonlance Adventures. So the guy from legal comes up and he goes, "You're using Dragonlance as a noun." And Gene said, "Yes, they throw the Dragonlance." And he says, "No, you can't do that. It's an adjective." And Gene said, "You mean you want us to say they threw the Dragonlance lance?" And he goes, "Yes."
Oh, jeez.
And Gene said, "No." And honest to God, this was an argument that went on for a week. That legal department was adamant that we were only going to be able to use it as an adjective. And finally, they let us go ahead and use it as a noun, but they were pretty sure that it was going to ruin the trademark. And Jean said she would take responsibility if it did. So yeah, we did have legal.
And this whole time that's going on, you guys are still, continuing on with the writing, I assume.
Oh, yes, we're continuing on working, and I'm just hoping and praying I don't have to go back and put Dragonlance lance into everything.
Do you still have, in the books that you write today, do you still have similar situations with legal departments?
No.
No, so you don't have to face the trademark.
Let's see, we did have, my daughter and I wrote a couple of romance novels. I don't know whether you guys know this or not, but we did. And one of them, they're set in modern times about handsome, hunky male angels who come down to Earth and the women who fall in love with them. And so anyway,
I know.
One of the novels, the second novel, has to do with I think it's called, what's it called? There's Warrior Angel and Fallen Angel. But anyway, has to do with a rock and roll singer who has, really sold his soul to the devil. And so we've got this rock and roll singer. So I wanted to use quotes from the music, but that's very, very tricky. If you want to use a quote from a song in a book, like as a chapter quote, you have to get permission from the artist. And
Really?
I knew, because I did this in Star of the Guardians, and I wanted to use a quote from the Grateful Dead, and I wanted to use a quote from Bob Dylan. So we had to get permission. The Grateful Dead were, "Oh, yeah, use it, cool." Bob Dylan never answered the mail. So I knew in advance this might be a problem. So it occurred to me, I said, okay, can I use the quote if one of the characters says it? For example, if I want a character to say, "Send lawyers, guns, and money,"
Right.
can I use that? And they had to check with their legal department, who came back and said, yes, as long as the character says it in the context of the book, we don't need permission from the artist.
Ah.
Wow.
Okay. Good to know. All right. So that's going to wrap up our show for this week. Margaret, do you have anything what's coming out from Margaret Weis in the future that we can look forward to, or the fans can look forward to?
Let's see. The second book in the Dragonships series by Tracy and myself that's already come out. That's Secret of the Dragon.
Right.
The one I'm working on right now is the first book in the Dragon Brigade series by Margaret Weis and Robert Kramus. And I'm not sure yet when that's going to come out. Sometime next year, I think, because there's no publication date been set yet. But
how many concurrent storylines are you working on at a time right now?
I only work on one at a time because I get my worlds mixed up.
Yeah.
Because I actually kind of live in the world I'm writing in, so I can't move back and forth between worlds.
I do want to ask, just as we're getting ready to part, I did want to ask a little more about how you're doing this in your day-to-day, because when you are as work-directed as you are as an author, do you need to find an inspirational time in your day or place, or is it I'm going to sit down and do this, it doesn't really matter if I'm inspired or not?
Yeah, I mean, if you wait till you're inspired to write something, you'll never write anything.
Yeah.
I mean, this is my work, and admittedly, it's work I love, but I have to set a time of the day when I sit down, because even now, there's nothing more daunting than looking at the blank screen of a computer and thinking, where am I going to start? When am I going to write today? And I'll sit there and I go, well, maybe I can go play with the dogs, or maybe I'll clean the house, or, But no, so at, 7:30, that's when I turn off the Today Show and I start writing.
I think it's good for any of our listeners who are artists or writers of any sort to hear things like that. I mean, my favorite quote for around that sort of thing, I don't know if you know the artist Chuck Close, but Chuck Close, my favorite quote from him is, "Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work."
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Okay, well, Margaret, thank you for joining us on this show. We hope to have you back in the future.
Thank you for inviting me. This has been fun.
It has been wonderful.
So, the future of Dragonlance may not be in Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, but who knows what the future holds, and maybe we'll see something in the future, maybe we won't.
Yeah,
so everybody go and go take a look at, find the books on Amazon, go to margaretweis.com for Margaret Weis Productions. Let's make sure we get all of the places that people can go and experience some of the things that you're making.
Do you have
I've got a Facebook page, and you can find me on Facebook, and Margaret Weis Productions has a Facebook page, and in fact, my Facebook page, I'm going to start doing some kind of teaser stuff for the Dragon Brigade novels.
Definitely.
So you want to kind of watch that.
You can go to cortexsystemrpg.org for any information on the Cortex system and all the games involved with Cortex system, which is a fabulous system. I suggest everybody take a look at it. I really did enjoy the Supernatural game. We were playing it one night just as a tester, and we had a lot of fun playing that. So.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. If you ever need any material, let me know.
Oh, wow. Well, I appreciate that, and maybe I will hit you up for some good information on the games and the Cortex system, because we did have a lot of fun playing it. And that'll wrap everything up tonight, and we're going to say keep it original and keep it old school. Oh, and Jason, you had something you wanted to mention before we went off the air tonight, something really special.
Oh, just a little teaser for next week. I'm really happy because I went to the mailbox this week and we got an actual letter in the mail from one of our readers. And so, first of all, I want to say thank you.
It's an actual letter,
because an actual letter, because handwritten, the whole thing, which is really nice because I know that this is a podcast. We're in the world of digital, but it feels really good to get somebody taking the time to sit down and write a physical letter and put a stamp on it. So I want to encourage this more. This letter came from Aptos, California. The return address only has the letter S for a name, and it is signed The Shadow. So we will read this on the air next week. It's actually going to be the basis for a feature segment, so I just wanted to say thank you to The Shadow for writing in, and we will find out what he has to say next week.
Definitely. Stay tuned next week for issue number 19 when we'll talk about the letter and everything else, and continue to go to the website and comment on the author's articles that we have posted up. Visit Margaret Weis at margaretweis.com, and keep it original, keep it old school. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Roll for initiative.